I told my daughter I was retiring and traveling the world, signed over control of my luxury hotel chain to her and her CEO husband. What they didn't know, I was testing them. I disguised myself as a poor old woman and walked into the lobby while she live-streamed her glamorous life to thousands of followers. She threw scalding coffee in my face, screamed, "Get out, you filthy trash, you're ruining my shot." Her husband had security drag me out like garbage. That was enough for me. I made one phone call. 10 minutes later, 5 black limousines pulled up, and they dropped to their knees, begging. Thank you so much for being here. Before we continue, I want to hear from you. Where are you listening from right now? Let me know in the comments. One more thing, this narrative includes some creative elements designed to illustrate important life lessons. While the specifics may be dramatized, the message about dignity, family values, and karma is absolutely genuine. Let me tell you about the day my own daughter threw hot coffee in my face and had absolutely no idea she'd just assaulted the woman who owned the very hotel where she worked. My name is Rosalind Fairchild, and I'm 58 years old. To most people in the hospitality industry, I'm the chairwoman of Grandstone Luxury Hotels, a collection of 8 high-end properties scattered across the United States. The kind of title that opens doors and commands respect. But that Saturday afternoon in Miami Beach, I wasn't Chairwoman Fairchild. I was just another middle-aged woman in faded jeans and a plain white t-shirt, oversized sunglasses covering half my face, a medical mask hiding the rest. I looked like any cautious tourist trying to avoid the Florida sun. Nobody gave me a second glance. That was exactly the point. 8 months earlier, I'd announced to my family that I was retiring, stepping back, handing over the reins. My daughter Clarissa and her husband Maxwell seemed thrilled, Maxwell especially, since I'd named him CEO of our newest flagship property, the Grandstone Ocean Tower, right here in Miami Beach. They thought I was spending my retirement touring Europe, sipping wine in Tuscany, strolling through Parisian gardens. They had no idea I was actually conducting what I called my final audit, testing them. Watching to see if they were truly ready to inherit the empire my late husband and I had spent 22 years building. Richard died 7 years ago, sudden and cruel. The grief nearly destroyed me, but I had a choice: crumble or honor his memory by making our dream even bigger. I chose to build. We went from 6 properties to 8. Our revenue tripled. And through it all, I tried to teach Clarissa that real success isn't about the luxury you display. It's about the integrity you maintain when nobody's watching. Apparently, that lesson didn't stick. Which brings me to that Saturday in July 2023. The temperature hovered around 88 degrees, that thick Miami heat that makes your clothes cling to your skin the moment you step outside. I'd flown in that morning under a pseudonym, took a rideshare instead of the company car, and checked into a modest hotel 3 blocks away. Then I put on my disguise, which wasn't really a disguise at all, just the clothes of someone who doesn't have money to waste on designer labels, and walked the 15 minutes to the property that bore my family's legacy. The Grandstone Ocean Tower rose 25 stories against the brilliant blue sky, all gleaming glass and polished limestone. The entrance featured massive rotating doors and a valet stand where young men in crisp uniforms jumped to attention for every arriving vehicle. I pulled open the door, no valet rushed to help me, of course, and stepped into the Arctic blast of air conditioning and the grand lobby beyond. Marble floors stretched out like an ice rink, reflecting the light from 3 massive crystal chandeliers. The front desk curved along the far wall, all dark wood and gold accents. Guests milled about in resort wear and business casual, their voices creating that particular hum of affluent travelers who expect perfection. I stood there for a moment, pulling down my mask to breathe, adjusting my sunglasses. I was looking for small things. Were the floors spotless? Were the staff attentive? Did the guests look satisfied? But mostly I was looking for my daughter, and that's when I saw her. Clarissa stood in the very center of the lobby, phone held high above her head, her face arranged in that peculiar frozen smile people wear when they're performing for an invisible audience. Her designer dress, something pink and expensive that I definitely hadn't paid for, sparkled under the chandeliers. Her hair and makeup looked salon fresh, like she'd just stepped out of a professional styling session. And she was talking, her voice projecting across the marble expanse, bright and artificial and utterly confident. She was live streaming, right there in the middle of my hotel's lobby during what should have been her working hours. I stood back, just another anonymous tourist, and I watched my daughter perform. Her voice carried across the lobby like she was hosting a talk show, bright and practiced and utterly artificial. And this, guys, is what I'm talking about. This is luxury. Clarissa swept her arm toward the chandeliers, her movements exaggerated for the camera. The Grandstone Ocean Tower is literally Miami's hidden gem, and you're getting an exclusive behind-the-scenes tour with yours truly. She wore a hot pink Chanel dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, her makeup applied with the precision of a professional artist, perfectly contoured cheekbones, lips glossed to a high shine, not a single hair out of place in her carefully styled waves. Everything about her screamed curated perfection. This was her brand, Miami Luxury Life with Clarissa. 450,000 Instagram followers, 85,000 YouTube subscribers. And right now, according to the viewer count, I could just barely make out on her screen, 12,000 people were watching her live stream. My daughter had become an influencer, a full-time performer of her own manufactured reality. I stayed where I was, near a cluster of potted palms, watching this stranger who wore my daughter's face. She panned the camera across the lobby, narrating every detail like she was David Attenborough documenting wildlife, instead of just standing in a hotel where she was supposed to be working. See that marble Italian Carrara? Those chandeliers, custom Swarovski crystal. This isn't just a hotel, babes, this is an experience. The comments scrolled past on her screen faster than I could read them. Hearts and fire emojis and enthusiastic responses from people who'd probably never set foot in a place like this, but loved watching someone else pretend they belonged here. When had this happened? When had my daughter, the girl who used to curl up with library books on rainy afternoons, who'd written a heartfelt essay in 5th grade about wanting to be a teacher, turned into this? I remembered Clarissa at 10 years old, gangly and gap-toothed, more interested in her collection of Nancy Drew novels than in clothes or makeup. She used to help me fold towels in the laundry room of our second hotel, asking thoughtful questions about how businesses worked, what made guests happy, why integrity mattered more than profit. That girl seemed to have vanished completely. I made a decision. I needed to see how deep this transformation went. I needed to know if there was anything left of the daughter I'd raised, or if that person had been completely buried under filters and follower counts. I adjusted my mask, pulled my sunglasses down slightly, and walked toward her with the hesitant steps of someone who genuinely needed help. "Excuse me," I said quietly, politely, the way any older woman might approach a hotel employee. "Could you point me toward the restroom?" Clarissa didn't even glance at me. She kept her phone raised, her smile locked in place. "Sorry you're blocking my shot," she said, her voice still maintaining that fake sweetness for her audience, but her words unmistakably dismissive. I stepped slightly to the side and tried again, a little louder this time. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I really just need... seriously." Now, she did look at me, but only long enough to shoot me an annoyed glance before returning her attention to the camera. "Can't you see I'm working here? The front desk is right over there. Go ask them." Her tone was ice cold. Not a hint of respect, not a shred of the courtesy we'd trained every Grandstone employee to show guests, especially elderly ones, who might need extra patience. She didn't recognize me. Of course she didn't. When was the last time she'd really looked at me? When was the last time she'd seen me as anything other than an obstacle to her aspirations or a checkbook to fund her lifestyle? I stood there invisible to my own child and felt something crack inside my chest. And then she turned back to her phone and said something to her audience that made my blood run cold. She pivoted toward her camera, every trace of irritation vanishing behind that practiced smile. "Sorry about that, everyone," she cooed into the lens, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "You know how it is, some people just don't understand boundaries in luxury spaces like this. But we're professionals here, so let's keep this tour positive, okay?" The comments section on her screen exploded. I could see them scrolling past, even from where I stood. "So rude," entitled much, "literally blocking the shot, SMH, kick her out, Each comment felt like a small knife. These strangers, these people who knew nothing about me or my life, were judging me based on a carefully edited narrative. They saw what Clarissa wanted them to see: an inconvenient obstacle, a rude interruption to their entertainment. I should have walked away. Any reasonable person would have. But I stood there giving my daughter one final chance to remember who she was, to show even a sliver of the kindness I'd tried to instill in her. Clarissa reached for her iced coffee, one of those oversized clear cups filled to the brim with some elaborate caramel creation. She held it in one hand while adjusting her phone with the other, still talking to her audience about the challenges of creating content in public spaces. And then she turned suddenly and dramatically as if she'd forgotten I was standing there. The entire contents of that cup hit me square in the chest. Cold liquid soaked through my white t-shirt, instantly spreading across my stomach, dripping down onto my jeans. The sweet, sticky smell of caramel and espresso filled my nose. Ice cubes bounced off me and skittered across the marble floor. For a moment, the whole lobby seemed to freeze. Then Clarissa screamed, "Oh my God, what did you do?" She jumped back, staring at her dress like I'd deliberately attacked her. "You just walked right into me. Look what you did to my Chanel." There was a tiny splash mark on her pink dress, barely noticeable. Meanwhile, I was drenched coffee dripping from my clothes, forming a puddle at my feet. But Clarissa wasn't done with her performance. "Everyone, did you see that?" She swung the camera toward me, zooming in on my coffee-stained shirt, my stunned expression. "This woman just deliberately bumped into me. I can't believe this is happening." Her livestream viewers ate it up. The comment section went wild. "She totally did that on purpose. What is wrong with people? Call security right now. Poor Clarissa." I stood there, frozen in place, the cold seeping through my clothes and into my bones. But the physical cold was nothing compared to the ice spreading through my chest as I watched my daughter, my own child, spin this moment into content, into drama, into currency for her online persona. She didn't see me. She saw an inconvenience, a problem to be dealt with, a villain for her story. Around us, other guests had stopped to stare. A few pulled out their own phones, recording this spectacle. Hotel staff lingered at the edges of the scene. I recognized a few faces, people who'd worked for Grandstone for years, but none of them stepped forward. They looked uncertain, uncomfortable, but unwilling to contradict the CEO's wife, except for one. In the far corner near the elevator bank, I caught sight of Irene Mullins. She'd worked in housekeeping for almost 15 years, starting back when we only had 3 properties. She was watching this unfold with deep concern etched into her weathered face, her hands clutched together like she wanted to help but didn't dare. Our eyes met for just a second. I saw recognition flicker there. She knew something wasn't right about this situation, even if she couldn't quite place why. Then Clarissa's voice pulled my attention back. "This is completely unacceptable," she announced to her audience, her free hand already reaching for her other phone. "I need to call my husband. Security needs to handle this before someone actually gets hurt." I stood there drenched and humiliated in front of thousands of strangers watching through their screens. And then my daughter did something even worse than throwing coffee at me. She made a call. The phone pressed against her ear and Clarissa's voice shifted, still performing, but now with an edge of authority that made my chest tighten. "Maxwell, babe, I need you down here." She paused, tilting her head as if considering how to frame the situation for maximum effect. "There's a situation in the lobby. Some woman is causing a disturbance during my live stream. Some woman. Not a guest. Not even an older lady. Just some woman, as if I were a piece of unwanted debris cluttering her carefully curated world." I stood there, the coffee still dripping from my shirt onto the pristine Italian marble, and watched my daughter orchestrate my humiliation with the precision of a seasoned performer. Her followers were eating it up. The comment count on her screen was climbing faster than I could track. "OMG, is she okay? Security needs to handle this ASAP. That woman looks sketchy, AF." Clarissa ended the call with a dramatic sigh, turning back to her camera with practiced concern. "My husband, the CEO, is coming down personally to handle this, because at Grandstone we take guest safety seriously. She emphasized the word guest with just enough irony to make it clear she didn't consider me one. Behind me, I heard the soft shuffle of footsteps. A young man in the hotel's burgundy bellhop uniform approached early 20s, clean-cut with kind eyes that immediately set him apart from everyone else in that lobby. His brass nameplate read Caleb Donovan. "Ma'am." His voice was gentle, respectful. "Are you all right? Can I get you some towels?" The kindness in his tone nearly undid me. After everything, the cold dismissal, the spilled coffee, the public mockery here, was someone who saw me as a human being worth helping. "That would be very kind, thank you." I managed my voice steadier than I felt. Clarissa's head snapped toward us, her smile faltering for just a fraction of a second. "Caleb, I've already called the CEO. You don't need to—" "I'm just getting the lady some towels, Ms. Fairchild," Caleb said politely, already pulling several thick white towels from a nearby service cart. He handed them to me with a small, sympathetic smile. "The restroom is just around that corner if you need to clean up properly." I accepted the towels, noting the way Clarissa's jaw tightened. She didn't like her narrative being interrupted by simple human decency. "Guys," she said into her phone, her voice climbing half an octave, "this is exactly what I was talking about earlier. Boundaries, respect. This is a 5-star establishment, and some people just don't understand how to behave in luxury spaces." 12,000 people were watching her turn my humiliation into content. 12,000 strangers were forming opinions about me based on my daughter's performance, and none of them knew the truth. The elevator chimed. My heart began to pound, not from fear, but from the weight of what was coming. I'd given Clarissa every chance to recognize me, to treat a stranger with basic dignity, to show even a glimmer of the values I'd tried to instill in her. She'd failed every test. Now it was Maxwell's turn. The doors slid open with a soft whoosh, and I heard the confident footsteps I'd come to know over the past 18 months, the sound of a man who believed he owned every room he walked into. Caleb was still standing beside me, holding an extra towel. Clarissa had angled her phone to capture the elevator doors, and I, coffee-stained, anonymous, invisible, waited to see if the man I'd appointed CEO of this property would be any different from his wife. My son-in-law was on his way down. The elevator doors slid open and Maxwell Drummond stepped out like he owned the world. Well, at least he thought he did. 6'2" of carefully cultivated confidence, wrapped in a charcoal Armani suit that probably cost more than Caleb made in 3 months. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his jaw set in that expression I'd seen in 100 boardrooms, the look of a man who'd never been told no and didn't plan to start hearing it now. He didn't even glance at me. Why would he? I was just another inconvenience cluttering his pristine lobby. "Maxwell, oh, thank God you're here." Clarissa rushed to him, her phone still recording as she threw herself against his chest. "This woman has been completely out of control." Maxwell's arm wrapped around her shoulders as his cold blue eyes finally landed on me. The contempt in that gaze was pure. "Ma'am," he said, his voice carrying that corporate politeness that actually means get out. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises immediately." I kept my voice calm. "I was simply asking for directions to the restroom, and you've created a disturbance." He gestured at my coffee-stained shirt at the small crowd watching. "Our staff will escort you out. Security." Beside me, Caleb shifted. I could feel his discomfort. This young man who'd done nothing but offer kindness was now caught in the crossfire. "Sir, with respect," Caleb began carefully, "I don't think this lady meant any—" Maxwell's head snapped toward him. "Did I ask for your opinion, Donovan?" The words came out like bullets. The lobby went quiet. Even Clarissa's Livestream comments seemed to pause. "No, sir, but you're fired." Maxwell's expression didn't change. "Effective immediately. Clear out your locker and leave the property within the hour." The blood drained from Caleb's face. "Sir, I've been here 3 years. I don't care if you've been here 3 decades. Maxwell turned back to me as if Caleb had already ceased to exist. "Anyone who questions my authority doesn't belong on my team. Now get out of my sight." Caleb looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw apology in his eyes. as if he'd failed me somehow by trying to help. He opened his mouth, closed it, then turned and walked toward the staff hallway with his shoulders hunched. I watched him go, committing every detail to memory. This boy who'd shown more character in 5 minutes than my daughter had shown in months. Fired. For kindness. Clarissa was practically glowing, angling her phone to catch Caleb's retreat. See, this is what happens when you maintain standards. Excellence doesn't compromise. Her comments exploded. Yes, Queen, your man is powerful. That's how you handle disrespect. CEO energy. My son-in-law had just fired a good employee for defending an innocent woman. My daughter was celebrating it as content, and 12,000 strangers were cheering them on. Heavy footsteps echoed across the marble floor. Jerome Dixon was 40 years old, stood 6'4", and had the build of a man who'd spent his entire life in the military. He looked like he could snap me in half without breaking a sweat. "Get her out," Maxwell said coldly. "Now, and don't be gentle about it." Jerome's hand closed around my upper arm like a vice. His fingers dug into the soft flesh above my elbow, hard enough that I knew there'd be bruises tomorrow, 5 perfect circles in purple and yellow. "Let's go, lady," he growled already, pulling me toward the entrance. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I didn't resist. What would be the point? I let him drag me across that beautiful Italian marble floor I'd personally selected 3 years ago. Each step echoed in the sudden silence. The crowd of guests had stopped pretending not to watch. A middle-aged couple near the concierge desk whispered to each other. What did she do? Poor woman. Must have been something serious. Near the front desk, I caught sight of Heather Dalton, one of our reception staff. 28 blonde, always professional. She was watching with wide eyes, her hand frozen halfway to her keyboard. I could see the concern on her face, maybe even recognition. But she didn't speak up, just watched as I was forcibly removed. In the far corner, partially hidden behind a floral arrangement, stood Irene Mullins, our head housekeeper, 50 years old, 22 years with the company. She was staring at me with narrowed eyes, her head tilted slightly as if trying to solve a puzzle. But she remained silent, too. Everyone remained silent, except Clarissa. And that is how you handle entitled behavior. Her voice rang across the lobby, bright and triumphant. Justice has been served everyone. When you disrespect a luxury establishment, there are consequences. The comments flowed. You tell them, girl. So brave. She got what she deserved. Your husband is a king. Jerome pushed me through the revolving door with unnecessary force. The door spun glass and brass, catching the light, and then I was outside. The Miami heat hit like a physical wall. 90 degrees, maybe more, the sun beating down relentlessly. The coffee stains on my white shirt were drying, leaving dark brown marks. My jeans felt damp and uncomfortable. Tourists walked past on Collins Avenue, too absorbed to notice one more disheveled woman. Jerome released my arm with a final shove. "Stay out," he said. "If I see you back here, I'm calling the cops." He turned and walked back inside the revolving door, spinning closed with a soft whoosh of air-conditioned air. I stood alone on the steps of my own hotel, staring at the gleaming glass doors, at the brass grandstone logo at the doorman, who was deliberately not looking at me. Through the glass, I could see the lobby continuing as if nothing had happened. Guests checking in, bellhops moving luggage. Clarissa still holding her phone, probably wrapping up her live stream with some inspirational message about boundaries. My arm throbbed where Jerome had gripped it. My shirt was ruined. My dignity, at least in the eyes of those 12,000 strangers, was shattered. But inside, I felt no sadness, no hurt, just cold crystalline clarity. I stood there in the Miami heat watching the doors of my own hotel close behind me. They thought it was over. They thought they'd won. They had no idea what was coming. Outside, under the brutal Miami heat, I pulled out my phone and made the call that would change everything. Chester Hammond, the number I'd saved 15 years ago when I'd first promoted him from regional manager to chief operating officer. The man who'd stood beside me through expansion projects, hostile takeover attempts, and my husband's funeral. The only person in the entire organization I trusted without question. He answered on the first ring. "Mrs. Fairchild, are you all right? I've been monitoring the situation." Of course he had. Chester wasn't just competent, he was thorough. When I told him 3 days ago that I'd be conducting this test, he'd positioned himself exactly where he needed to be ready to move the moment I gave the signal. "Chester," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor I felt inside. "It's time. Bring the cars, contact the board of directors, and bring every file we have on Maxwell Drummond and Roger Kensington." A pause. Then, "Including the embezzlement evidence, ma'am, are you certain?" I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I looked back at those gleaming glass doors at the hotel that bore my family's name, at the empire my husband and I had built from nothing. I gave them every chance, and they showed me exactly who they are. "We'll be there in 10 minutes. The entire board is standing by." Good. I took a breath, feeling the heat radiating off the concrete steps beneath me. "And Chester, bring the additional support I requested as well." "Already arranged, ma'am. 10 vehicles, full documentation, legal team prepared." "Thank you, Chester." "It's an honor, Mrs. Fairchild. What they did to you today." His voice tightened with barely controlled anger. "It ends now." I ended the call and sat down on the steps outside my own hotel. The marble was hot beneath me, the sun merciless overhead. Sweat began to bead on my forehead, mixing with the faint stickiness of dried coffee on my skin. I probably looked like exactly what Clarissa had called me, some poor, disheveled woman who didn't belong in a place like this. A couple walked past tourists in their 50s wearing matching Panama hats and carrying shopping bags from the design district. The wife stopped when she saw me concerned, crossing her kind face. "Ma'am, are you okay? Do you need us to call someone?" The genuine compassion in her voice nearly broke something in me. A complete stranger showing more care than my own daughter had. "That's very kind of you." I managed, offering her a small smile. "I'm fine, really, just waiting for my ride." She didn't look convinced, but her husband gently touched her elbow and they continued down Collins Avenue, glancing back at me with worried expressions. I checked my watch. 8 minutes. Inside the hotel, Clarissa was probably still basking in her viral moment. Maxwell was likely already back in his office, having forgotten about me entirely. Jerome had returned to his security station, and 12,000 people had watched me get humiliated without knowing the truth. But in 8 minutes, the truth would arrive. I thought about Caleb Donovan, that young man who'd lost his job for showing basic human decency. I thought about Heather Dalton's conflicted face, wanting to help, but too afraid to risk her position. I thought about Irene Mullins, who'd served this company for over 2 decades, watching in silence as I was dragged out like trash. And I thought about the $3.5 million that Maxwell and Roger Kensington had embezzled over the past 18 months, thinking I was too old, too trusting, too checked out to notice the discrepancies in the expansion project budgets. The pain in my chest, the heartbreak of being rejected by my own child, had crystallized into something harder, sharper, more dangerous. 7 minutes, 6 minutes, 5. And then I heard it, the low rumble of engines. Multiple engines, growing closer. 5 black limousines turned onto Collins Avenue in perfect formation. They moved like a funeral procession, slow, deliberate, impossible to ignore. The lead vehicle bore no markings, no flags, nothing to indicate who was inside. But the sheer presence of 5 identical Mercedes S-Class limousines rolling up to a hotel entrance was enough to stop traffic. Literally. A taxi honked. Tourists paused mid-step, phones already rising to capture whatever was about to happen. The valet attendants at the Grandstone entrance froze, clearly unsure how to handle an arrival of this magnitude. The first limousine pulled directly in front of the entrance. The second stopped behind it. The third, fourth, and fifth fanned out in a precise semicircle, blocking the circular drive completely. Chester Hammond emerged from the lead vehicle first. 55 years old, impeccably dressed in a charcoal black suit that probably cost more than Jerome Dixon made in 6 months. His salt and pepper hair was perfectly combed, his expression calm and professional. He carried a leather briefcase in one hand, the kind of briefcase that held either very important documents or very damning evidence. In this case, both. He walked directly to where I still sat on the steps, coffee-stained and disheveled, and extended his hand. "Welcome back, Madam Chairwoman." he said, his voice carrying clearly across the entrance. I took his hand and stood. My legs were steadier than I'd expected. Behind Chester, the doors of the other 4 limousines opened in synchronized precision. 10 people emerged, 5 men, 5 women, all dressed in dark business suits, all carrying leather portfolios. The Grandstone Luxury Hotel's board of directors, every single voting member. I recognized each face: Eleanor Rodriguez, our chief financial officer, Tom Parker, head of property development, Patricia Whitmore, VP of guest services, Stephen Park, legal counsel. All of them people I'd worked with for years, people who knew exactly what Maxwell Drummond and Roger Kensington had been doing, people who'd been waiting for this moment. Inside the lobby, I could see movement through the glass doors, guests gathering, staff members abandoning their posts to watch, and there, in the center of it all, still holding her phone, Clarissa. Her voice drifted out through the revolving door, thin and uncertain. What's happening out there? Maxwell appeared beside her, and even from here I could see the color drain from his face. Chester offered me a crisp white handkerchief. I took it and wiped the dried coffee from my cheek, from my neck, from the collar of my ruined shirt. Then I removed the oversized sunglasses I'd been hiding behind. The face mask came off next, dropped into Chester's waiting hand. Finally, I reached up and pulled the elastic band from my hair. The silver-gray waves I'd kept carefully pinned fell loose around my shoulders. Hair I'd stopped coloring 5 years ago when Richard died. Hair that marked me as a woman who'd earned her authority through decades of work, not through performance and filters. The transformation took maybe 30 seconds. When I walked toward those glass doors, I wasn't the confused tourist who'd been thrown out. I was Rosalind Fairchild, chairwoman, founder's widow, owner of 65% of Grandstone Luxury Hotel's voting shares. The board fell into formation behind me, 5 on my left, 5 on my right, Chester at my shoulder. We moved as one unit, and the crowd of tourists and curious onlookers parted instinctively, creating a path. The doorman, the same one who deliberately avoided eye contact 15 minutes ago, now scrambled to pull the door open wide, his face pale, his hands shaking slightly. The lobby's crystal chandeliers caught the light as we entered, throwing rainbow prisms across the Italian marble floor. Every conversation stopped. Every phone turned toward us. Even the ambient music seemed to pause. I walked through my hotel not as a beggar asking for directions, not as a problem to be removed, but as the woman who'd signed the checks that paid every salary in this building. And then someone in the crowd, a woman standing near the concierge desk, gasped audibly, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh my God," she breathed. "That's Rosalind Fairchild." From somewhere in the crowd of hotel guests, a voice full of authority rang out. Rosalind Fairchild, good Lord, it really is you." A distinguished gentleman in his mid-60s stepped forward, his silver hair perfectly styled, his navy Tom Ford suit impeccable, even in the Miami heat. He moved through the frozen crowd with the confidence of a man accustomed to boardrooms and Senate hearings. Stanford Remington, venture capitalist, Forbes billionaire, and my late husband's closest friend for over 30 years. He crossed the lobby with long strides and took my hand in both of his grip warm and sincere. "I thought you'd retired," he said, his blue eyes twinkling with understanding. "The business world has been so quiet without you." I allowed myself a small smile. "Reports of my retirement have been greatly exaggerated, Stanford." Something flickered across his face, recognition, perhaps even admiration. He'd known Richard well enough to understand exactly what I was doing here. He'd sat through enough of our dinner parties, heard enough of our late-night discussions about legacy and responsibility to know that I would never truly walk away from what we'd built. He turned to face the crowd, and his voice took on that commanding tone I'd heard him use in congressional testimony. "Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce Mrs. Rosalind Fairchild, founder and chairwoman of Grandstone Luxury Hotels." The lobby erupted in whispers. Shocked faces turned to each other, seeking confirmation of what they'd just heard. Staff members who'd been watching from the sidelines suddenly looked like they wanted to sink through the marble floor. Near the front desk, Heather Dalton had gone completely white, her hand over her mouth. Irene Mullins stepped out from behind her floral arrangement, her face a mixture of horror and vindication. I knew it, her expression said. And there in the center of the lobby stood Clarissa. Her phone slipped from her fingers. It hit the marble with a sharp crack, the screen shattering into a spiderweb of broken glass. But the live stream was still running, still transmitting everything to her audience, an audience that had now swelled to 28,000 viewers. The comments scrolled past in a blur. Wait, what? She's the owner. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. That girl is so fired. This is the best plot twist ever. Maxwell stood beside her, his corporate mask finally cracking. Sweat beaded on his forehead. His hands, which had been so casually dismissive an hour ago, were now clenched into fists at his sides. Stanford wasn't finished. He gestured toward me with the respect one shows a head of state. This woman's late husband, Richard, was my dearest friend. Together they built Grandstone from a single property into an 8-hotel empire. And clearly, his gaze swept meaningfully across the assembled board members, across Chester Hammond with his damning briefcase, across me in my coffee-stained clothes. She's been paying very close attention. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Everyone in that lobby understood what he was really saying. You've been caught. I felt the weight of every eye in the room. The tourists who'd whispered about me, the staff who'd watched me get dragged out, the guests who'd assumed I was just another problem to be removed. Even the crystal chandeliers seemed to be watching their light catching on Chester's briefcase, on the portfolios carried by my board members, on the shattered phone at my daughter's feet. "Thank you, Stanford," I said quietly. "Your words mean a great deal." He squeezed my hand once more, then stepped back, positioning himself slightly behind me, a silent show of support that everyone recognized. I took a breath. The lobby was absolutely silent now. 28,000 people were watching through Clarissa's broken phone. The board stood at my back. Chester held the evidence of 18 months of theft. And before me stood my daughter and the man she'd married. It was time. The lobby was completely silent. Every eye was fixed on us. "Hello, Clarissa. Hello, Maxwell." My voice was calm, steady. Not loud, but in that silence it carried to every corner of the room. Clarissa's face crumpled. She took a stumbling step forward, her hands reaching out like a child seeking comfort. "Mom, oh God, Mom, I didn't recognize you in those clothes. I swear I didn't know it was you." "That's exactly the problem, isn't it?" I cut her off, my tone cold and precise. "You didn't know it was me, but you knew exactly what kind of person you were being." She flinched as if I'd struck her. Maxwell stepped forward, his corporate training kicking in, despite the sweat now running down his temples. "Mrs. Fairchild, this is all a deeply unfortunate misunderstanding. If we could discuss this privately—" "No." The word landed like a hammer. "This stopped being private the moment you chose to humiliate someone publicly. Chester, the files, please." Chester opened his briefcase with deliberate precision. The sound of papers rustling seemed deafening. He pulled out 3 thick folders, each labeled and tabbed with different colored markers. I took the first folder, opened it, and began. Maxwell Drummond. Over the past 18 months, you have embezzled $3.5 million from Grandstone Luxury Hotels through fraudulent invoicing related to the spa and restaurant expansion project. Maxwell's face went from pale to gray. "That's completely... There are contracts with contractors who don't exist." I flipped through the pages, holding up document after document. Bank statements showing wire transfers to shell companies, invoices for materials that were never delivered, and your signature. I held up a particularly damning contract on every single approval. Chester stepped forward, his voice professionally neutral. The money was routed through 3 separate shell corporations before landing in an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. We have the full paper trail. This is fabricated. Maxwell's voice rose, cracking slightly. "I would never..." "And you didn't do it alone." I turned my attention to the back of the lobby where Roger Kensington, our chief financial officer, 48 years old father of 3, was trying to edge toward the rear exit. "Roger, stay where you are." 2 board members moved to block his path. Roger froze, his face ashen. Roger Kensington signed off on every fraudulent approval. I continued. He created the false budget reports. He manipulated the quarterly statements to hide the discrepancies. In exchange, he received, I consulted the document, $400,000, deposited into an account under his wife's maiden name. Roger's mouth opened and closed like a fish pulled from water. No sound came out. The crowd was transfixed. Somewhere, someone's phone was recording. Clarissa's shattered phone was still live streaming from the floor. I could see the notification counter climbing 32,000 viewers now. Clarissa stood frozen mascara beginning to streak down her face in black rivers. Her hands trembled at her sides. Effective immediately. Maxwell Drummond, you are terminated from your position as CEO of Grandstone Ocean Tower. Your employment with Grandstone Luxury Hotels is ended. Security will escort you from the property. You are not to return. Maxwell's jaw clenched. You can't. I can, and I am. I turned to my daughter. Clarissa Fairchild, you are removed from your position as Director of Marketing and Brand Management. Your employment with Grandstone Luxury Hotels is terminated, effective immediately. Mom, please. Her voice was barely a whisper. You both had every opportunity to show character today. You chose cruelty instead. You chose greed. You chose to humiliate someone you thought was powerless. I paused, then turned my gaze to Jerome Dixon, who stood near the security desk, his face carefully blank. And those who enabled this behavior, who followed orders without question, who used force against an innocent person, they're done here too. Jerome Dixon, you're terminated, effective immediately. Jerome's eyes widened in shock. Now you all know how it feels to be powerless. The silence that followed was absolute. Those words hung in the air like a death sentence. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Clarissa's knees buckled. She dropped to the marble floor and grabbed at my hand with both of hers. Mom, please, I didn't know anything about the money. You have to believe me. I pulled my hand away gently but firmly. Maybe you didn't know, but you knew how you treated people, how you treated strangers, how you treated me. I'm sorry. Her voice broke into sobs. I'm so sorry. Please, I'll do anything. Just give me one more chance. You had a chance every single day, Clarissa. My voice was steady, though something inside me was cracking. You showed me exactly who you've become. I can't enable that anymore. Maxwell's shock was transforming into rage. He stepped forward, face flushed. You can't do this. I'll sue. This is defamation. Chester's voice cut through like a blade. Security. The real security team, please escort these two individuals off hotel property. Two professional security officers appeared not Jerome's people, but members of the corporate team Chester had brought. They were calm, efficient, unmoved by Maxwell's threats or Clarissa's tears. Don't touch me, Maxwell jerked away. I'm calling my lawyer. This is wrongful termination. This is justice, I said simply. They led them toward the entrance, Maxwell shouting threats, Clarissa looking back at me with devastated eyes. The crowd parted. Nobody spoke. Nobody defended them. The 32,000 people watching through the broken phone saw everything. When the doors closed behind them, the lobby seemed to exhale. I turned and found who I was looking for. Mr. Donovan. Caleb straightened still in his burgundy uniform. Yes, ma'am. You were fired today for doing the right thing. I'm reinstating you immediately, and I'm promoting you to guest relations manager. You showed integrity when nobody else did. That's rare. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. I don't know what to say. Thank you, Mrs. Fairchild. You earned it. I turned to address the remaining staff. The rest of you, your jobs are safe. Nothing changes except leadership. Chester will be acting CEO until we find a permanent replacement. Relief rippled through the crowd. Shoulders relaxed. A few people smiled. I spoke with Chester briefly, confirming next steps and authorizing legal action against Maxwell and Roger. Stanford shook my hand and promised to call. The board dispersed with their instructions. Then I went to the hospital. The emergency room doctor treated the minor burns on my arm, first degree, nothing serious, just salve and bandages. The coffee stains would wash out. The bruises would fade. 2 hours later, I sat in the back of Chester's limousine as it drove toward my home in Coral Gables. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. I was alone, and finally I let myself cry. Not dramatic sobs, just quiet tears sliding down my face as the city rolled past. Tears for the daughter I'd raised and the stranger she'd become. Tears for the family I'd thought we were. I'd won the battle. But it felt like the loneliest victory of my life. I thought the worst was over. I was wrong. 3 days of silence. 3 days of hoping they'd learn the lesson. Then on Tuesday morning, my doorbell rang. I was in my study at the Coral Gables estate reviewing quarterly reports from our other properties, trying to lose myself in numbers and projections, anything to avoid thinking about what had happened in that lobby. The house felt too big, too empty. Richard had always filled it with his laughter, his presence. Now it was just me and the echoes. The doorbell chimed at 10 o'clock. When I opened the door, they were on their knees on my front steps. Clarissa wore a plain gray t-shirt, no designer labels, no carefully coordinated outfit. Her hair hung limp around her face, unwashed. Her eyes were swollen and red-rimmed like she'd been crying for days. Maybe she had. Maxwell knelt beside her in jeans and a wrinkled polo shirt. The Armani suit was gone. The corporate confidence had evaporated. He looked smaller, somehow diminished. "Mom," Clarissa's voice cracked on the word. "We've lost everything. The penthouse, the cars, our accounts, they froze everything. We have nowhere to go." I stood in the doorway, my hand still on the handle, my heart a stone in my chest. "Please." Maxwell's turn, now his voice stripped of its usual arrogance. "Mrs. Fairchild, I made terrible mistakes, but we're family. Doesn't that mean something? Doesn't that count for anything?" I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. Her cheekbones stood out too sharply. Her hands trembled. This was the girl I'd rocked to sleep when she had nightmares. The teenager who'd cried on my shoulder after her first heartbreak. The woman I'd walked down the aisle just 2 years ago. Every instinct screamed at me to pull her inside to hold her to fix this. "I'll start at the bottom," Clarissa whispered. "I'll scrub floors. I'll answer phones. I'll do anything, Mom. Just don't shut me out completely. I'm begging you." She pressed her forehead to the concrete step. A sob shook her shoulders. I thought about Richard, about the night before he died when he'd held my hand and told me, "Sometimes the greatest love is letting them fall so they can learn to stand on their own." I'd argued with him then, said that parents should always catch their children. He'd smiled sadly and said, "If you never let them fall, they'll never learn to fly." Clarissa, Maxwell. My voice was steady, though tears were already building behind my eyes. "I love you both, but you need to stand on your own feet. It's the only way you'll truly grow." "Mom, no!" Clarissa's head snapped up, panic flooding her face. "Please don't do this." "I believe you can do this." A tear escaped running down my cheek. "Prove me right." I stepped back and closed the door. Through the solid wood, I heard Clarissa's wail, raw and broken, and utterly devastating. I heard Maxwell's angry shout, then his attempt to comfort her, then both of them pleading, begging, promising anything and everything. I pressed my back against the wall and slid down until I was sitting on the floor of my own foyer, my hands pressed over my mouth to muffle the sounds of my own crying. The doorbell rang again, and again. Their voices carried through the door, but I didn't open it. Eventually, the ringing stopped. The voices faded. I heard a car start, probably an Uber, since I'd had their company vehicles repossessed and drive away. The house was silent again. 4 days passed in that silence. I tried to focus on work, tried to move forward, tried to convince myself I'd done the right thing. Chester called with updates on the legal proceedings. Stanford sent flowers. The board sent reports. I thought this story was over. I thought the hardest part was behind me. But that Saturday night, while I slept peacefully in my own bed, something horrifying was already in motion. Before I reveal the shocking event that rocked the entire neighborhood, comment, "Still listening, so I know you're with me." Heads up, what comes next is partly dramatized to make a powerful point. Skip if that's not your thing. Otherwise, let me tell you about the night everything burned. It was Saturday, July 22nd, 2023, 4 days after I'd closed the door in their faces. I'd gone to bed early, exhausted from endless board meetings and conference calls with our legal team about the embezzlement case. The clock on my nightstand read 1:45 a.m. when something pulled me from sleep. Not a sound, a smell. Sharp, chemical, wrong. I lay still for a moment, my brain foggy with sleep trying to place it. Gas leak. No, that had a different quality, sweeter, almost sulfuric. This was harsher, more acrid. My eyes snapped open. Gasoline. I sat up, my heart already beginning to race. The smell was stronger now, seeping under my bedroom door like an invisible fog. This wasn't a leak. This wasn't an accident. Someone was in my house. I slipped out of bed, my bare feet silent on the hardwood floor. My phone, I needed my phone. But when I grabbed it from the nightstand, the screen stayed black. Dead. I always turned it off at night to avoid disturbances, one of Richard's old habits I'd kept. Stupid, so stupid. The smell was overwhelming now, making my eyes water. I moved to the bedroom door and pressed my ear against it, listening. Footsteps. Definitely footsteps. Downstairs. Moving through my home with purpose, not trying to be quiet. The sound of something heavy being dragged across the floor, a metallic clink. My mind raced through options. The balcony I could climb out, drop to the patio below, run to the neighbors. But that would mean leaving without knowing who was down there, what they were doing, whether they were still in the house or already gone. The gasoline smell was making me dizzy now. How much had they poured? How long had I been breathing it? I had to know, had to see. I opened the door as quietly as I could and stepped into the hallway. The smell hit me like a physical wave so strong I had to cover my nose and mouth with my hand. Moonlight streamed through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the staircase. I took one step down, then another. The third step creaked slightly under my weight, and I froze, holding my breath. Nothing, no reaction from below. I took another step, and then the front door burst open. A figure rushed in, stumbling, gasping, moving with desperate speed. I pressed myself against the wall, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. Moonlight caught the figure's face. Clarissa. She looked up and saw me on the stairs. Her mouth opened in a scream. Mom, get up, get out, the house is rigged to explode. Time seemed to slow down. I saw every detail with crystalline clarity, her hair hanging in tangled strings around her face, her eyes wild and red-rimmed, her t-shirt torn at the shoulder. She wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to know where I lived, though of course she did. She'd grown up in this house. But why was she here? Why now? At almost 2 a.m? And who had rigged my house to explode? Mom, move. She was already running toward the stairs, her hands outstretched. We have maybe 2 minutes, maybe less. He set a timer. My blood turned to ice. The smell, the footsteps, the methodical sounds of someone working. Maxwell. My daughter's face showed absolute terror, the kind of fear that comes from knowing exactly what's about to happen. Her hands were shaking. Her voice cracked when she screamed again, "Please, Mom, run." And in that frozen moment, I knew something very, very terrible was happening. There was no time for questions, no time for confusion. Clarissa grabbed my hand and yanked me down the stairs with strength I didn't know she had. We have to go now. What's happening? Where's Maxwell? The words came out automatically, even though part of me already knew the answer. He's lost his mind. Tears streamed down her face as she pulled me faster. He set a timer. He's trying to, Mom, please, just run. At the bottom of the stairs, I could finally see the full horror of what had been done to my home. Puddles of gasoline covered the living room floor, spreading across the Persian rugs Richard and I had bought in Istanbul, pooling around the furniture we'd chosen together. The chemical smell was overpowering, burning my throat with every breath. In the corner near the fireplace, a small device sat on the mantel. Red lights blinked in steady rhythm, a digital timer counting down. How long? My voice was surprisingly calm. Clarissa looked at the display and her face went white. 2 minutes. Oh God, Mom, we only have 2 minutes. We ran for the front door. Clarissa reached it first and grabbed the handle, twisting hard. It didn't move. No, no, no! She pulled harder, then threw her shoulder against the solid oak. The door didn't budge. He locked it. He locked us in. The back door. I grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the kitchen. Through the kitchen. We ran across the tile floor, our bare feet slipping on gasoline that had spread even here. The acrid fumes were so thick now I could barely see. My eyes watered. My lungs burned. Clarissa was ahead of me, her hand reaching for the back door handle when my foot hit a particularly slick patch. My legs went out from under me. I went down hard, my knee slamming into the tile with a crack that sent lightning bolts of pain shooting up my leg. For a second, I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Just pain and the overwhelming smell of gasoline and the knowledge that somewhere behind us, that timer was still counting down. Mom. Clarissa was there instantly, her hands under my arms trying to lift me. Get up, please get up, we're almost out. I struggled to my feet, putting weight on my injured knee and nearly collapsing again. Clarissa caught me, steadied me, half-dragged me the last few steps to the door. Her hands shook so badly she could barely work the lock. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3, each one feeling like an eternity. The deadbolt clicked. The door swung open. Cool night air rushed in sweet clean, free of chemicals. I could see the backyard, the pool reflecting moonlight, the hedges along the property line. Freedom, safety, life. We stumbled through the doorway together, and then the world exploded. The blast lifted us off our feet and hurled us forward like rag dolls. I felt myself flying through the air in a strange, weightless moment that seemed to last forever and no time at all. The sound was beyond sound, a pressure that punched through my entire body, turning everything into a high-pitched ringing that swallowed all other noise. I hit the grass hard, rolling the world spinning in a kaleidoscope of sky and ground and fire. My injured knee screamed. My shoulder took the brunt of the impact. Somewhere in the chaos, I lost track of which way was up. When I finally stopped rolling, I lay there on the wet grass, gasping for air. My ears rang with a steady, piercing tone. Everything hurt. My vision was blurred, doubled, swimming with stars and shadows. But I was breathing. I turned my head slowly because everything was spinning and saw Clarissa a few feet away, also on the ground, her chest heaving with panicked breaths. Behind us, my home, the house Richard and I had bought 30 years ago where we'd raised our daughter. Where we'd built our life was engulfed in flames that reached toward the night sky like grasping fingers. The heat was intense even from here. The roar of the fire was starting to break through the ringing in my ears. We were alive. For a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't think, just lay there on the wet grass staring up at the smoke-filled sky, my body screaming with pain. Then I heard it, a sound that cut through the ringing in my ears like a knife. Clarissa crying. Not the dramatic sobs from the hotel lobby or the desperate pleas at my front door. This was different, raw, broken, the sound of someone in real pain. I turned my head and saw her about 10 feet away, curled on her side. In the flickering orange light from the burning house, I could see her left leg bent at an unnatural angle. Her face was contorted in agony. "Mom," her voice was barely a whisper. I can't move my leg." I forced myself up, ignoring the protests from my injured knee, my bruised ribs, my entire battered body. Crawled across the grass to reach her. Her leg was broken. I could see it, even without medical training, the way it lay, the swelling already beginning, the way she couldn't put any weight on it without crying out. "It's okay, baby, I've got you." I brushed the hair back from her soot-covered face. "We're safe now. A deep, ominous rumbling came from inside the house. I looked back. The flames had spread to the kitchen, and the kitchen was where the main gas line ran through the wall, feeding the stove, the water heater, the fireplace. 30 years in this house, I knew every pipe, every wire, every potential danger. And I knew what that rumbling meant. "We have to move." I tried to keep my voice calm. "Right now." "I can't." Clarissa's eyes were wide with pain and fear. "Mom, I can't stand. I can't." "Then I'll carry you." I didn't give her time to argue. I got behind her, hooked my arms under hers, and started dragging her across the lawn away from the house. Every movement sent fresh agony shooting through my burned hands, my wrecked knee. Clarissa cried out as her broken leg dragged across the grass. I'm sorry, I gasped, pulling harder. But we have to get farther away. The gas line, 20 feet from the house, 25, 30. The rumbling grew louder, 40 feet, 50. My strength was giving out. My vision was blurring. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything except pull and pull and pull. 60 feet. I collapsed beside Clarissa, both of us gasping, and wrapped my body over hers just as the world exploded for the second time. This blast was different, bigger. The first explosion had been gasoline igniting, flash and fury. This was structural destruction. The gas line rupturing, feeding the fire with pressurized fuel, turning the entire house into a bomb. The shockwave rolled over us like an invisible hand, pressing us into the earth. I felt the heat on my back, felt debris whistling overhead. Something heavy landed a few feet away, a piece of the chimney red brick blackened with soot. Then the house began to collapse. The roof went first, caving inward with a sound like thunder. The walls buckled and fell. Windows exploded outward in glittering cascades. The second floor, where I'd slept peacefully just an hour ago, folded down into the first floor with a crash that shook the ground beneath us. I stayed over Clarissa, shielding her as burning pieces of wood and shingles and glass rained down around us. Something hit my shoulder. Something else grazed my arm. But nothing hit her. Finally, the rain of debris slowed, stopped. I lifted my head. Where my home had stood, where Richard and I had planned our future, where we'd celebrated Clarissa's first steps, where we'd hosted Christmas dinners and anniversary parties and quiet Sunday mornings, there was only fire and rubble and smoke rising into the pre-dawn darkness. Gone, all of it, gone. Beneath me, Clarissa was sobbing. I'm so sorry, Mom. This is all my fault. I should have known, I should have stopped him. Shh. I rolled off her and pulled her against me, careful of her broken leg. You came back. You warned me. You saved my life. But Maxwell, I know. I held her tighter. I know. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Someone must have called 911. Red and blue lights began to flash through the trees at the end of the driveway. Debris still smoldered around us. Black smoke filled the sky. My hands were ruined. Clarissa's leg was broken. We were both covered in burns and cuts and bruises. But we were breathing. We were alive, and we were together. Fire trucks, ambulances, and police cars flooded the driveway. Paramedics lifted us onto stretchers. As they wheeled us toward the ambulances, I kept my eyes on Clarissa, refusing to let her go. Miami General Hospital put us in the same room. I wouldn't have it any other way. Clarissa had a broken leg and second-degree burns on her arms. I had severe burns on both hands and smoke inhalation. But we were alive, and we held each other's hands across the gap between our beds. That's when she told me everything. She'd overheard Maxwell on the phone late that night, something about tonight ends everything. When she'd questioned him, he'd brushed her off. But she couldn't shake the feeling something was wrong. She'd found gas cans in his trunk, a timer lighter fluid. When she'd confronted him, he'd admitted everything with chilling calm, said I'd destroyed his life and he was going to destroy mine, starting with me. She'd run, stolen his keys and driven like a madwoman to warn me. Chester arrived the next morning with news Maxwell had been arrested trying to flee. They'd found his fingerprints on the timer device receipts for gasoline and text messages detailing his entire plan. 3 weeks later, Clarissa and I sat side by side in the Miami-Dade County Courthouse. She leaned on crutches, her legs still in a cast. My hands were bandaged, healing slowly but leaving scars I'd carry forever. Maxwell was led in wearing an orange jumpsuit, hands-cuffed face, empty of the charm that had once fooled us all. That's when the final truth emerged, the truth that explained everything. Maxwell Drummond's real name was Maxwell Richardson. His father, Richard Richardson, had competed with Grandstone in 2008. When the financial crisis hit, Grandstone survived. Richardson's company didn't. He lost everything. In 2010, Richard Richardson died by suicide, leaving behind a 15-year-old son who blamed my family for everything. Maxwell had spent 13 years planning his revenge, changed his name, created a new identity, Marrying Clarissa wasn't love, it was strategy. The $3.5 million embezzlement was just the beginning. He'd planned to bankrupt Grandstone piece by piece. When I'd fired him when his plan failed, he decided if he couldn't destroy my legacy, he'd destroy me. The prosecutor presented the evidence: gas cans, timer, accelerants, text messages, reading, "If I can't destroy her legacy, I'll destroy her." Clarissa testified with a shaking but clear voice. She described finding the evidence, his cold confession, how he'd locked me inside and set the timer for 2:15 a.m. when he knew I'd be in deepest sleep. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, showed no mercy. "Mr. Richardson, you orchestrated years of deception. You stole millions. You attempted to murder an innocent woman in her own home while she slept. You showed no remorse, no hesitation, no humanity." Maxwell stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. "I hereby sentence you to 25 years in federal prison without possibility of parole, full restitution of all embezzled funds plus damages. And when you are released, if you live that long, you will be permanently barred from working in hospitality, finance, or any position of trust." 25 years. He'd be nearly 60 when he got out if he survived prison at all. As they led him away, he looked at Clarissa once, not with anger or regret, with nothing, just emptiness. My daughter looked away. 2 years passed like water through fingers. The Coral Gables estate had been rebuilt more beautiful than before, with modern fire suppression and security systems. The gardens flourished again. Clarissa stood beside me on the new front steps, her leg fully healed, her influencer days long behind her. She worked at Grandstone now as assistant manager of guest relations Caleb's department. She'd earned it through genuine hard work, and she loved it. "Mom," she said softly, "I'll never be able to thank you enough for giving me a second chance, for saving my life." I pulled her close. "You saved mine first, sweetheart. People say blood is thicker than water, but I learned something that night in the flames. Love isn't perfection. It's getting back up after you fall. It's running into the fire for the people who matter even when you're terrified." My daughter had been lost, but when it mattered most, she chose right. She chose me, and that choice redeemed everything. Being a mother isn't raising perfect children. It's loving imperfect children unconditionally, and when they fall, helping them find the strength to stand again. Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the strongest thing we can do. That's my story. The day my daughter threw coffee in my face and learned what family truly means. And to you listening to this story, remember this: God gives us trials, not to break us, but to shape us. When I saw my daughter throw that coffee in my face, I could have walked away forever. But God whispered to my heart, this is a test of your love, not her worthiness. These family drama stories teach us that forgiveness is divine. God commands us to love unconditionally, especially when it's hardest. These grandma stories aren't just about hurt, they're about redemption, about choosing grace over grudges. If you're facing betrayal from someone you love, don't do what I almost did. Don't close your heart completely. Yes, set boundaries. Yes, demand accountability. But leave room for God's miracles. Because the girl who humiliated me became the woman who saved my life. Family drama stories like mine remind us people can change. Grandma stories passed down through generations all say the same thing: love bears all things, believes, all things hopes, all things endures, all things. God didn't give up on us. How can we give up on each other? Learn from my mistakes. I almost lost my daughter twice, once to pride, once to flames. Thank God I got a second chance. Not everyone does. If this story touched your heart, please leave a comment below, sharing your own family drama stories or grandma stories that shaped who you are today. Have you ever had to choose between justice and mercy, between boundaries and forgiveness? I'd love to hear from you. And if you enjoyed this journey, please hit that subscribe button and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Your support means the world and helps these stories reach people who need them most. Thank you so much for staying with me until the very end. Your time and attention are precious gifts. Before you go, a quick reminder: the stories on this channel may contain fictionalized elements created for educational and inspirational purposes. If this type of content isn't for you, feel free to explore other videos that better suit your preferences. We respect your choices and appreciate your understanding. God bless you all. Until next time.